Good evening, I'm Ces Oreña-Drilon.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And I'm Shawn Yao.
The big stories tonight. Who's to blame for the partial collapse of an Isabela bridge that cost over ₱1 billion to build and retrofit? President Bongbong Marcos is not naming names, but points the finger at a design flaw.
DICT Chief Ivan Uy has resigned and will be replaced by an OIC. He is the second secretary to quit in barely a month after the DOTR's Jaime Bautista.
And one Supreme Court Associate Justice calls out PhilHealth for the improper use of its budget, saying it may be time to overhaul the state health insurer's leadership.
We begin with the collapse of the Cabagan-Santa Maria Bridge in Isabela, a disaster that injured 6 people and will now cost more taxpayers' money to rebuild. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. saw for himself the destruction and blamed the bridge's flawed design.
Ang ending nito, ang punot-dulo nito, design flaw. It is a design flaw. Mali yung design. Ito lang ang suspension bridge na nakita ko sa buong mundo na hindi kable. At yan na mismo ang bumigay. Ayan o.
The cables the president was referring to are the bridge's support cables. Though in an earlier interview, DPWH Secretary Manny Bonoan said that while the bridge design did have cables, solid steel and not cable strands were used. Cable strands are mainly used for suspension bridges. The president also said that the original budget for the bridge construction was cut. From 1.8 billion pesos, it was cut to less than 1 billion in order to save.
Ang history kasi nito, dapat ang funding nito was supposed to be, ang project cost nito is 1.8 billion. So binawasan to under 1 billion para makamura. Ayan, inayos ngayon, ginawa ngayon yung detail design. Design is really weak.
The Cabagan-Santa Maria Bridge project started in 2014 and it was completed in 2018. But the bridge was not immediately open to the public due to design adjustments. In 2022, the bridge had to be retrofitted to comply with the DPWH's new design code. It was finally opened last February 1, but only to light vehicles. On February 27, 3 trucks reportedly used the bridge before it collapsed. An investigation into this incident is still ongoing.
A lot of questions after this bridge's partial collapse, and we're hoping our guest could give us the answers. And joining us tonight on the phone is DPWH Secretary Manny Bonoan. Good evening, Secretary. Welcome to the Big Story.
Good evening po. Good evening, everybody. Good evening po sa our listeners. Yes, po.
Secretary Bonoan, nagsalita na po ang Pangulo, but who can you identify as behind this design flaw?
Well, one area is actually on the design, which the President actually noted. Actually, kasi may mga, the way the part of the bridge collapsed, something may noticeable na parang it might have been sa poor design or sa lack of design. And the other thing is actually because nagkaroon bigla ng na-stress yung bridge because of the passage of 2 heavy trucks weighing 100 tons each. No?
Opo. The question is, Secretary, who is behind this design flaw? Sino po yung design? I understand it's a local construction company.
Consulting firm. Local consulting firm.
Sino
It's a
po
local
yun?
consulting firm.
Right. Do we have the name?
Well, it's a consortium of 3 consulting firms. And this was designed way back in 2012, 2013 po. Yung yata.
But under the
according to
direction
the record.
of the DPWH signed off on the design by this consortium.
No, they were engaged by the department at that time. They were engaged by the department to do a detailed engineering design of the bridge.
Still, the question is, did you not discover this design flaw before allowing, heavy vehicles to pass on the bridge?
Well, the history of that bridge actually, as we have discovered, is actually sometime during the construction of the bridge by the contractor. I think the contractor noticed something wrong in the way it's going to be constructed. May notice that nagtitil yata some of the parts. So he called the attention of the consultant and the DPWH as well. So this is the reason why I think at some point in time the department and has to engage another consultant to see if there is a need to retrofit or adjust the design. And
In
true
the
enough, actually,
in the
meron-
end, Secretary, accountability has to be pinpointed. And who now will, because you're the head of DPWH, who should it be?
Yes.
Kayo po ba as head of DPWH will accept, the buck stops with you?
Yes, but we are actually undertaking the design because the whole construction and the design of the bridge was undertaken long before we entered into this administration.
But how does that work, right? So it calls to question so many things about processes on, hiring these consultants. Like, who will double check the consultant? Because we think it's the DPWH secretary, right? And when it comes to one of the... Right. Go on.
The selection of the consultants were done way back, not under this administration.
Yes, but for example,
Not
you
under this
inherited...
administration.
Right, so it was already pointed out that the
Yes,
three
ma'am.
administrations had uphand in this bridge, albeit
Yes,
na
okay.
90% of it was during the previous administration. But it doesn't, I think, it does not exonerate any of the others, because how do you pass on, for example, to the next administration? How is the turnover? Do you not make a check? For example, Secretary, binuksan yung bridge noong Feb 1. So it's been under the Marcos administration since 2022, July.
Yes, po. Let me
check
clarify
nyo
a
ba
little
uli?
bit po.
Oh, sige lang. Sige
Let
lang
me
po.
clarify a little bit po. Because this bridge has not been turned over to the department or to the government at this point in time, no? It is under still the responsibility of the contractor. Now, we were supposed actually to do the confirmatory test and loading test before we would have accepted that bridge.
So hindi pa
No,
siya
because we
na-turnover?
this bridge was just open temporarily for light traffic by the contractor.
Hindi
For
ho
light
ba,
traffic only.
o yun na nga hindi ho ba sana pinigilan ng DPWH dahil hindi pa nata-turn over sa inyo?
Well, I think, in fairness to the contractor, there were signages at the two ends of the bridge na may mga advisories that only light vehicles are allowed and trucks are not allowed. Unfortunately, yung mga loaded trucks we continue to pass by po.
So do you think that's one thing that we can work on now that we know na nagyari nga to, meron talagang hindi nagpa-follow kahit gaano kalaki pa yung signage sa mga bukana ng bridge?
Yeah.
Do you think, Secretary, moving forward, pwedeng turnover muna bago tapos testing muna bago buksan kahit to pedestrian man lang or motorsiklo, kasi yun yung sinasabi nila, matagal na raw dumadaan dyan yung mga pedestrian tsaka yung mga motorcycles?
Yeah, because they did not allow actually motor vehicles to pass by because it was being retrofitted muna. So it was retrofit pa muna until until the end of 2024. So,
Pwede mo nating,
So,
Secretary, may we go back to the President mentioned that the budget allocated for this was supposed to be 1.8 billion but reduced to 1 billion dahil nagtitipid. Kailan po yung desisyon na ito na isagawa, yung pagbawas ng budget? Have you been able to look into that?
yeah, before the detail engineering design was made, before the project was initiated, which we covered.
So
what we understand
what
is that
year and under who was the DPWH secretary? Who were the authorized officials then?
no, well, going back to the records, I think the secretary at that time was Secretary Singson yata po, or anyway, I think what we uncovered is that this bridge project was supposed to be included in the official development assistance from the Japanese government. And it's supposed to be done with financial assistance from the Japanese government, but it was pulled out. Ayan yung 1.8 billion that sinasabi is actually supposed to be the cost under the official development assistance of the Japanese government. So, but then there was a decision yata that somebody said that it can be built by less than 1 billion. So there was a decision of government at that time na we will local funding na lang. So it went through local funds po.
You are referring to to DPWH Secretary Singson during President Aquino's term.
Sorry, I am not very sure of that when the decision was made po.
Okay, well, let's talk about the retrofitting that happened in 2022. I'm not sure exactly when in 2022 because that's about the time we changed administration. Secretary, nung ni-retrofit, ano yung finding, no, that necessitated?
Let me correct that again po. We assumed under this administration that in July of 2022. The decision for retrofitting was made in 2021, but it was only implemented in 2022.
Okay, and what necessitated the retrofitting? Was it poor supports?
Because there were observations that seems to have that must be corrected. Dun sa bridge in itself during the construction.
Well, Secretary, this unfortunate incident resulted in many injuries. Isa na po doon ay isang 8-year-old na bata who even sustained fractures. What kind of assistance will the DPWH be giving to these victims of the collapse?
Well, we are very thankful that the governor of Isabela has taken care of by the injured motorist po.
And very quickly na lang, Secretary, before we let you go, when can we expect a comprehensive report about this incident, kung ano nagyari, para hindi na siya maulit? I think that's the main goal naman of everyone here.
Well, we will have our technical report by siguro technical report as the President said that we let's expedite the technical investigations at this point in time. For the purpose of making sure that we can expedite also how we can reconstruct the bridge. While we are doing that, I think tinignan din natin yung mga responsible persons or anything. Actually, we were also thinking the responsibility of the truck drivers and the owners of trucks. So if just pass by with
Kailan po yun?
overloaded.
Kailan po? I-expedite ninyo kailan po? Kailan po natin aasahan? May petsa po
By
ba?
next week pa.
Monday?
By next week pa.
Tuesday? Wednesday?
No, at the end of the week po siguro.
End of
Ganong
next week.
katagal po?
Yes po. Because we want we need to see if yung kwan po ng yung if the other response have been compromised as well.
All right. So we thank you for that, and we do hope you will be able to pinpoint culpability.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was DPWH Secretary Bonoan.
Moving on to other news now, the black box or flight data recorder of the crashed Philippine Air Force FA-50 plane has been recovered. It will undergo analysis to determine the cause of the crash that killed its 2 pilots. The FA-50 fighter jet with tail number 002 went missing early Tuesday morning during a tactical night operation. It flew in support of ground troops supposedly on the trail of New People's Army or NPA units. On Wednesday morning, the wreckage of the aircraft with its 2 pilots were found in the vicinity of Mount Calatungan in Bukidnon. Senator Sherwin Gatchalian urged a thorough and transparent investigation into the crash. Gatchalian also honored the 2 pilots, Major Jude Salangoy and First Lieutenant A.J. Dadulia, for their sacrifice. First Lieutenant Dadulia was a member of the PMA Sinaglawin class of 2020, while Major Salangoy was a member of the Philippine Air Force team that took part in the 2024 Pitch Black exercise in Darwin, Australia. Their remains will be brought to Villamor Air Base in Pasay this weekend. The Defense Department says the FA-50 aircraft will continue to be part of the AFP modernization program. The remaining 11 FA-50 jets are currently grounded, and President Marcos has ordered a thorough but swift investigation into the incident.
It will be brought to the experts, and what we're going to find there, the usual, the data, flight data, all the flight data, the altitude, their airspeed, all the other things. The Philippine Air Force is going to be impartial, and we're going to conduct a very thorough and comprehensive investigation.
Pinamamadali po ng ating Pangulo ang maagarang pag-iimbestiga po dito kung saan nagkamali at kung ano pa ang maaaring maging remedyo.
The palace has confirmed the resignation of Department of Information and Communications Secretary, or is it, all right, Secretary Ivan Uy. According to Palace Press Officer Claire Castro, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has accepted Uy's resignation today. Castro said an OIC will be named until the President appoints a secretary. There is no official word yet as to the reason behind Uy's resignation, but reports have claimed this is due to criticisms of his alleged frequent trips overseas, which reportedly impacted his agency's performance. Uy is the 3rd cabinet member to step down in the first 3 months of 2025. He follows former Transportation Chief Jaime Bautista and Communications Secretary Cesar Chavez.
Like you were saying, no, ang tagal na nga umiikot. We were chatting earlier, no, sa dressing room, and Ces mentioned na ang tagal na nitong chinichismis.
Yeah,
And actually, totoo nga, ang dami ng mga chismis articles that have come out. And today, tonight.
Yeah. But you know, sometimes when these articles come out, you know that there's someone after the job. Right?
Like,
We'll see.
Hindi na lang siya, where there's smoke, there's fire. No? There might be someone out to get you.
Yes. So anyway, we will know soon enough.
But just, I guess, a quick look back at Secretary Uy's achievements. He did enact the SIM Registration Act. The criticism...
That was difficult.
That was difficult.
Yeah.
But the criticism, of course, is that ang dami pa ring spam texts na nakukuha until now. Di daw na nag-fly
Pero
yung
nabawasan.
Nabawasan naman. Lumipat sa mga WhatsApp and Viber.
There were also multiple hacking incidents under Secretary Uy's term. I mean, we had them on the show, right?
Yeah.
Remember when there were different the government agencies' websites were hacked. So those were some of the significant things. That includes, of course, the lower house and the PhilHealth data breach. That was under the term of Secretary Uy. And we'll see.
We'll see. Well, they have to replace the DICT secretary because these hacking incidents, according to the DICT themselves, number in the hundreds of thousands per day.
Yeah.
We hope we'll get someone who's, I guess, young, energetic, dynamic.
Well,
Not
that's
to
not a bad
say that
suggestion.
you're old. Sorry about that.
Right, we will see how things will pan out there. But for now, we're going to take a quick break. Coming up next, an associate justice at the Supreme Court is suggesting a thorough house cleaning in PhilHealth as more questions over the insurer's handling of its budget arise. More on this when the big story returns. Stay with us here on One News.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News. Supreme Court Associate Justice Antonio Ko Jr. suggests a complete leadership overhaul over at PhilHealth and for the National Treasury to return the 60 billion pesos in excess funds, quote unquote, that has already been transmitted to the state insurer or by the state insurer. During the third oral arguments on petitions against the fund transfer, Justice Ko insisted that PhilHealth should have at least used this budget to broaden benefit packages for members. Department of Health spokesperson, Assistant Secretary Albert Domingo said PhilHealth has always been instructed to do so, and yet 3 presidents and over 10 leaders since its inception in 2013, nothing has happened. The Bureau of Treasury replied that the funds were not spent because PhilHealth lacked personnel, hospitals, and equipment to implement programs, and that is why there are funds that have not been used. To this, Ko asserted that it is incumbent upon the insurer's leadership to give the people their taxes worth.
Probably it's time to overhaul PhilHealth and change the board for not complying what the law requires. As long as the government recognizes now, it is now incumbent on the part of government to return the 60 billion that was transmitted already.
Hindi po natin tututulan, hindi po natin lalabanan kung ano po ang inuutos ng Supreme Court.
Now let's discuss further with Professor Shelo Magno, former Undersecretary of the Department of Finance and one of the petitioners against PhilHealth's excess fund transfer to the National Treasury. Good evening po sa inyo.
Good evening, Ces, Shawn, and Pauline. Maraming salamat po sa pag-imbita sa akin dito sa One News.
You must be elated at, the statements or during your oral arguments, what Justice Ko had said about how PhilHealth should be run and also about, actually being on your side, more or less.
Yes, but Ces, the discussion has been very clear because the law on Universal Healthcare Act is also very clear in terms of how the money of PhilHealth should be used. But I think Justice Antonio Ko has emphasized a very important point because what the Department of Finance is saying is that they're just encouraging PhilHealth to use its fund. Kailangan daw ng, kung may carrot and stick, this is the stick. If you don't use the money, the government will get it and use it for something else. And I think the important point that Justice Ko is making is that there must be accountability too, because we might be forgetting that the board of PhilHealth is actually the Department of Finance. The members of the board includes the Department of Finance, the Department of Budget, Department of Health, Department of Labor, and the Department of Social Welfare and Development. And part of the responsibility of board members to make sure that PhilHealth is doing its job. And for me, the way that DOF is speaking, it's like it's not involved in the decision-making process of PhilHealth. So I think by making the point that they are also responsible for running PhilHealth and that they must return the money, I think it establishes the important role of the board on the accountability of PhilHealth.
Okay, Professor Shelo, one thing that really cropped up was the issue of absorptive capacity with regards to PhilHealth, right? Ang sinabi nga ni ASEC Albert Domingo, kahit naman itapon natin lahat ng pera na talagang do them, kahit tama yung math, kung hindi naman nila kayang gastusin dahil sa kakulangan ng tao, ng facilities, etc., wala din naman daw kwenta. This is one thing that you have raised in your previous podcasts over and over again. So I'm sure you're happy to hear that. But I mean, how hard is it to increase an agency's absorptive capacity? Meaning, we understand may red tape then even within the bureaucracy. So, ma-address ba ito ng madalian?
Yeah, that's the question, no? Like, for example, the organizational structure of PhilHealth. Isn't that part of the mandate of the board to review the organizational structure of PhilHealth? Who are serving as officers of PhilHealth? Who should they be hiring as officials and leaders of PhilHealth? Hindi naman yan usapin ng kakulangan ng pera dahil sabi nga nila may excess fund. Then they should be hiring people who are fit to run the organization. But you know what is funny? During the first oral argument, when the former president of PhilHealth was being asked, I was aghast. I was in the audience, and he cannot even answer questions. And these are people who are we are paying for about magkano sweldo niyan a month, mga around 500,000, and he can not even answer basic questions about PhilHealth. And that raises a lot of questions. If you are members of the board, we should demand accountability. from the officials of PhilHealth. And ASEC Domingo has been saying this has been the situation for many, many years. And that's the thing, no? It's good that this conversation is now being done so that the public would know how badly PhilHealth is being run. And I think when we demand accountability, it's not just accountability of PhilHealth officials, but also of these government agencies who are supposed to be oversight of this agency.
Well, Professor, we did hear Justice Ko during the oral argument saying it is now incumbent on the government to return the 60 billion pesos to PhilHealth. Are there any legal or financial mechanisms that would actually compel the government to return these funds to PhilHealth?
Well, a final decision by the Supreme Court on our petition would then compel the executive branch of a government to return the 60 billion pesos to PhilHealth.
The palace has said, Professor Shelo, na sabi through palace press officer Yusek Claire Castro, na kung utusan kami ng Supreme Court na ibalik yung pera, ibabalik namin. Ang tanong, ganun ba kadali din yun? Na ibalik na lang? What if nagastos na? I mean, do we have a history na nakita nating may inutos yung Supreme Court ibalik, tapos binalik talaga? Kasi ang naaalala ko lang off the top of my head ng mga examples ay inutos na ibalik, tapos hindi naman naibalik. Tapos walang nagyari.
Well, it depends. No, there are previous decisions of the Supreme Court where the court has recognized the mistake in the interpretation of the law. For example, the Internal Revenue Act, when Governor Mandanas submitted a petition to the Supreme Court regarding the problem in terms, or the mistake in terms of computing the internal revenue allotment. The court made the decision that it was indeed a mistake, and therefore you have to recompute. But because of the economic impact of, paying the local governments what the executive owed them, since the local government code in 1991, that would have a significant negative impact. And therefore, the court is saying that we can just apply the new rule moving forward. In this case, I think it's very clear that the direction that the justices are pursuing is the return of the 60 billion money. And if that's the decision, then the executive has to find the money to return the PhilHealth fund.
Yusek, I hope naman they will, if the government is really serious in its health program, it should put somebody capable to run PhilHealth.
I agree. Well, at least they've replaced already the president, and this person who replaced the president has track record in terms of running healthcare facilities. No, but it's not enough to rely on a new president. You have to look at the officials and officers, the directors of PhilHealth. And I think this will be part of the conversation in the Supreme Court, because Justice Kagiwa was also asking about the organizational structure of the actuarial office of PhilHealth. So I think in the succeeding discussions, the justices will look at this further.
Would you say also, in closing, is COA to blame as well in what happened?
Well, the function of COA is really to pinpoint the problems in terms of how PhilHealth is reporting its finances, how it's spending the money, but it's actually not the job of COA to improve the performance of PhilHealth. It's just monitoring it, pointing out the problems in terms of their performance. But it's the responsibility of the board to make sure that PhilHealth complies with the law, fixes their finances so that it becomes more sustainable. So that's why from the very beginning, I'm really surprised with the statement of the Department of Finance saying that, oh, this is PhilHealth's fault. When if we look at it, the Department of Finance, the Department of Health sit in the board of PhilHealth. And the other problem is if, for example, we allow this thinking of what the DOF is saying that if PhilHealth is not using the money, we should allow the Department of Finance to get the money and put it somewhere else. The problem there is, if that is allowed, there will always be an incentive for the board to not expand the expenditure side, so that there will always be excess money for the Department of Finance to get and finance the other portion of the budget. And so that's really very problematic.
But are you saying
so I'm
that
happy.
COA issue ample warnings or reports that would indicate that, these funds are not being used?
Utilized. Yeah,
Yes.
but it happens in every other agency. COA would issue this observation, and it's up for the agency to implement these changes and revise their implementation. So it is a balance of addressing and acknowledging and understanding the COA report, and for the executive and the board to implement the changes that's necessary to address this COA observation.
Ito, I'm not sure, Prof, no, very quickly lang before we say goodbye to you. Naalala ko, I was watching one of your early podcasts about this PhilHealth issue, and you were very firm on pointing out that fourth provision in the GAA that seemed to have been inserted by the House of Representatives, which never existed before. When is that going to be tackled? Because kung wala naman yun, provision na yun, hindi naman sila makakapagwalis ng mga excess, quote-unquote, funds, di ba, from our GOCCs.
Yes, that's actually one of the major arguments of the petition, aside from the Universal Healthcare Act being very clear on how we should spend the PhilHealth money. The other argument is that provision that was inserted in the GAA 2024 is actually unconstitutional because that provision actually tried to amend the existing laws that govern our GOCC. So for example, because it allowed the Department of Finance to get the fund balances of GOCCs, particularly PhilHealth, it amended the Universal Healthcare Act. And I think before we ended the second oral arguments, one of the justices already asked our lawyers on whether this provision amended the existing laws. And we said, our lawyer said yes. And that is the thing, no? Very general law, like the GAA, cannot amend specific laws. And the Supreme Court have previous decisions on that. So I think we have a very strong argument in our petition to ask the Supreme Court to declare that provision of 1D unconstitutional, and therefore that will become a basis also for the Department of Finance and the Treasury to return the money to PhilHealth and for Congress not to repeat it again.
Okay, and the fourth oral arguments have been set for late April, I think after, the Easter break and all of that. What's going to be on the table for the fourth round?
I think there will still be a lot of discussion. I'm very glad the justices are really looking into how PhilHealth is operating. And then that is very helpful, no? The people found champions in the justices by pointing out the inefficiency of PhilHealth and also the responsibility of the different agencies in making sure PhilHealth does its job. And that if we want PhilHealth to function, the role of the DOF is to make the executives do the responsibility of PhilHealth instead of getting the 60 billion pesos. And I think those are the points that the justices are making. So I'm really glad that we are continuing this conversation. And I think further scrutiny on how PhilHealth is being run is crucial in this conversation.
Thank you so much. You wonder why the executive and the legislative wash their hands of this problem, of this issue. We thank you so much.
They had a bigger problem of looking for money to finance their unprogrammed appropriations.
Well, it should have had a champion at least in the health department. Well, Professor Shelo Magno, thank you so much, former Undersecretary of the Department of Finance.
All right, meantime, here's the latest on the health of Pope Francis. He can now sit up and is no longer bound to his hospital bed. The pontiff's condition has remained stable with no episodes of respiratory issues. According to the Holy See Press Office, Pope Francis continues to receive high-flow oxygenation and will undergo non-invasive mechanical ventilation tonight. Despite his illness, the Pope alternated between rest and work. Now, he even called Father Gabriel Romanelli, parish priest in Gaza, which is something he's been doing ever since. The doctors share that there has been no respiratory crises in the last 2 days. However, his prognosis remains guarded. The Pope was admitted to Rome's Gemelli Hospital on February 14 and is still being treated for double pneumonia.
You're still watching The Big Story on One News. Coming up, we'll talk about sustainability with Melissa Vergel de Dios, First Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer at PLDT and SMART. Do keep it here on One News. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us here on The Big Story. Tonight, we introduce to you our newest segment, Sustainability. a weekly segment dedicated to tackling one of the biggest challenges of our time, climate change. And the big story is this: the Philippines is among the most vulnerable countries impacted by it, if not the most vulnerable. We're using this platform to shine a light on the companies, organizations, and individuals leading the way in sustainability and protecting our planet for generations to come. And to kick things off, one of the companies leading the pack is PLDT, a key player in our country's telecommunications. Recently, their improved S&P Global Sustainability Score earned them the title of Industry Mover, reflecting their efforts in responsible business, environment, and social impact. In fact, they're the only Philippine company to be included in the S&P 2025 Sustainability Yearbook. And with us tonight to talk more about it and their other initiatives is Melissa Vergel de Dios, First Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer at PLDT and SMART. She leads the Corporate Sustainability Office, overseeing the company's programs. Welcome to the Big Story, Melissa.
Thank you, Ces.
Okay, let's start with how big an impact is being included in the S&P Sustainability Yearbook.
Yes, so companies that belong to the yearbook are actually considered global leaders in the sense that for inclusion in the yearbook, you have to score within the top 15 of your industry, and your score has to be within 30% of the highest scorer. So in the case of PLDT, I guess it's a matter of pride for the company, but also it puts PLDT and the Philippines on the global stage insofar as sustainability is concerned. As you said earlier, PLDT is the only Philippine company in about 780 companies that are part of that yearbook.
And how stringent are the scores? It's almost like an audit, right? They check on whether what you claim is really true.
Correct. So to be able to be scored, you have to submit references. So it's not enough that you claim certain things. You have to have public references. So that's a sustainability report, that's our press releases that are verified by analysts, so that it's not something you can buy your way to. So something that's substantiated, referenced, completely referenced, yes.
You scored very high in human rights.
Yes.
But later we'll also go into e-waste, which is really important.
Yes.
Kasi ako madami akong e-waste. Ewan ko
Yan.
ikaw.
Iniipon ko sila kasi di ko alam saan ko itatapon.
Oh, yun na nga
Correct.
eh.
Waste, yung mga
Oo.
battery.
But
Yes.
let's talk about human rights first. Why is it so important to PLDT, and how do you manifest this in the organization?
So PLDT had a lot of, I guess, policies and codes of conduct and like that, no? But it was never woven into one document. So what we did was we effectively wrote the Constitution on human rights for PLDT that embodies everything that we stand for, whether it will be with respect to customers, clients, communities, and maybe the crossover into the business side. So first, sustainability is not about corporate social responsibility by itself. One of the things that human rights policy articulation did was a lot of the companies where we provide services to that require accreditation basically ask PLDT, where is your human rights policy? Absent of which, you cannot provide us any service. So in that sense, while sustainability seems to be this concept lang na about doing good and all that, there is a business element to it. And the human rights policy basically is an articulation of all that we believe in. And it becomes the anchor document for all other policies and how we operate.
Like what clients ask for these?
Especially foreign
The big
clients.
ones.
The big ones, yes. And European clients in particular. Because I guess they look at things like, what is your stance on child labor, for example? I guess in other countries, there are companies that have that use children. So in the case of PLDT, we do not employ child labor. And extending that a little further, for our supplier code of conduct in the accreditation process, we require that they also do not employ child labor. So that's one particular thing. In the case of PLDT, the right to speak for the employees. So we have a union, or we actually have 3 unions. The right for them to express themselves is also embodied there. Of course, the human rights policy also talks about if there is new technology, whether it's IoT or AI, we will do or we will deploy it in such a way that it is ethical and definitely it's very helpful because I guess new technology can be helpful, can also be dangerous.
And for children.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that's another advocacy for PLDT. We feel that as we serve customers, there are children who are the most vulnerable among our users. So they discover the wonders of the internet, but also they're exposed to a lot of dangers. So we take it upon ourselves to make sure that the children are especially protected.
Because you're an internet provider,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And some of them, very innocently, they click on sites. So what we have, special advocacy for us, we've invested in a platform that blocks malicious content that are harmful for children. Would you believe 1.6 million URLs are abusive sites or sites that have abusive content that we do not allow access to? And then we blocked 1 million attempts in 2024 for people who want to get to those sites. Obviously, they're not all our kids, but they're also from the demand side, usually foreigners who like children in a
So
bad
merong
way.
dedicated team that checks
There
this?
is a platform that operates 24/7 that protects children, but we also cannot rely on the platform alone. So we go around talking about how people can be more responsible about the use of the internet, teaching parents, kasi diba, at the end of the day, you cannot just use the platform. Parents have to teach their kids about screen time, how do you limit screen time, what is the proper use of the internet, and then teachers also. So we go around, whether it's elementary kids, high school, university kids, what is the proper use of the internet, and how do you avoid being either scammed or victimized by abusive content. So mga ganyan.
So now let's go to e-waste kasi I'm sure ikaw rin, Pawi,
Yes,
marami.
I wanted to ask Melissa, because in 2023, you collected 117 kilos. What was the number for 2024? Did that
117
kilos.
Lang.
We have more naman. We have more pa.
Probably more,
So we
probably.
started, maybe a little anecdote. We started for MVP's birthday. We said, we'll collect e-waste, diba, in 2 facilities in Makati. But we advertised it over the email, the internal email. And our employees in North Luzon yata said, paano naman kami, di ba? We collected, they showed us a box of things that they'd collected. And so it parang grew and grew. Our friends at Makati Med, so obviously part of the MVP group, also said, we also want to do that. And maybe like all of us, when we put the bin in the Makati Med hospital, lumabas lahat ng beeper ng doktor, di ba?
Actually, it's
They still
actually
have them.
public service.
Yes.
Public service yan
Yes.
kasi wala talaga siyang pagtatapunan. Like here in the
Totoo.
newsroom, we use a lot of batteries. There's
Ba't
boxes
hindi
where they're
kasali
collected.
ang
Baka
signal?
sumali
O
rin
di,
sila.
lalagyan na natin ng
Sama
bin
na yung
ngayon, di
namin
ba?
batteries.
But that's it, the basureros, they cannot collect the e-waste because it's bawal, di ba? So you need really a special collection. And beyond collection, whatever you're able to collect, you have to baklas. You have to take it out and urban mine let's say the phones. There's precious metals, there's copper, there's gold, palladium, and things like that. And that provides livelihood naman to the people who do that. So, and we make sure that the dangerous content doesn't contaminate landfills. So while PLDT is not a producer of phones or modems or the like, parang the delivery of our service requires us to use that. And you know naman how people are always changing their phones, the batteries always sira or the chargers always replaced. Where do you put those things? So when we put the campaign out, ang dami, lumabas sa cabinet lahat ng old gadgets. And
This
then,
is ongoing, Melissa?
Yes,
Ongoing.
yes.
Where can I put
Yeah.
my iPhone for? It's like taking
ko-
up precious drawer space, you know?
akala ko iPad version 1, di ba?
Yun na rin po.
Kailangan ko hanapin yun para maitapon na rin.
Don't you have a partnership with SM?
Yes, that's correct. That was the beauty of this effort. I guess people realize that, maganda yung campaign nila. And for us naman, what town doesn't have an SM, right? So I think they have over 80 SM malls, and we have a bin in every SM that made it accessible. Robinson's Malls also started to include our bins. And then SM has a, I guess, partnership or relationship with NU, the National University. So we go around now talking to students, putting the bins. And then in our marketing campaigns, let's say Home does a blitz in a community. So we put the bin there, and then yun, pwedeng dalhin yung
So
mga
sa SM Mall.
SM malls. Usually in the cyber zone.
And Robinsons pala. hindi
And
galeria.
Robinsons as
Robinsons
well, yes.
And in your in
The
PLDT
in
offices?
some of the sales offices. And then Makati Med has its own.
Ask for
For one
one
Siyempre
year.
naman,
Because we need, di ba? With the audio men here will know gaano kadaming battery talaga nakaipon. I said, So what's going to happen to them? They're like, we can't just throw it. So it's just there.
Correct. And then, e-waste is not limited to the phones, right? When we had the campaign, dumating na yung mga TV, yung mga ganito kalapad ng likod, di ba? Hindi siya screen.
The fat screen.
Yeah, because all of them are effectively electronic waste.
And so what is your role there? If they're collected in bins in malls,
Yes.
what does PLDT do?
So we collect the e-waste, and then we have a partnership with a transport, because you also need special permit to transport. And then we take it to a disposal, registered disposal and handling facility, and they're the ones that make baklas. They're the ones who take it apart, they gather all of the materials that you collect, and then they dispose of it. So PLDT is maybe we're the ones who make people aware and initiate the collection process. But we do have a partnership with many other parties at the different maybe parts of the process of handling and disposal.
Quick question, Melissa. Earlier when you were talking about human rights and about yung proliferation of, not child-friendly content or pornography, worse, child pornography, that's even worse. You get so many results with your platform. Do you share it with law enforcement agencies or with the government to give them leads as well?
Yes, so effectively the URLs that we block are actually shared with us by this Internet Watch Foundation. So they have a dynamic list, and that's updated all the time. And we do work with law enforcement to be able to apprehend the perpetrators. And the unfortunate, sad story, I think, about that is in many cases, actually during the pandemic, siguro because people were confined to the home, maybe they were challenged in terms of income. It's the parents who peddle the kids, diba? And under this concept na no harm, no touch, they just send pictures, pero it's really, it's a very sad situation. But I guess even the law for a while was not updated to evolve with technology. So we participated together with law enforcement, Department of Justice, and many other parties to try and update the law to catch up with technology. So today, the ones held accountable for crimes such as abusive of children, those that are abusive of children, include the ones, the money channels, diba? The e-wallets facilitate kasi bayad for the shows. The shows.
Online payments.
Yes, the online payments. And so not just the telco, in the old law, it was just the telco, but now everybody who participates in that crime is held accountable or could be held accountable. And I think the other good thing about that is that now there are LGUs who are capacitated to know how to deal with victims. Kasi nung araw, the victim musters enough courage to go to the barangay, and then the barangay will say, that's a problem of the family, just go home and fix it among yourselves. What a horrible thing to say to a child, right? But today, the LGUs are supposed to have ordinances that, and teaching, they teach them how to handle such situations. So, pati DSWD, so it's like a whole of nation approach, and hopefully we're able to address that problem in a very, I guess, organized manner.
Now going back to, the sustainability aspect or your impact on the environment, what is the commitment of PLDT in terms of being carbon neutral?
Yes, so we've made a commitment, we have a decarb road, what we call our decarb roadmap, to reduce our GHG emissions 40% by 2030 against a 2019 baseline. So among the things that we think we will undertake to be able to get there is to focus on operating efficiency. So the use of kuryente, because when you reduce your kuryente use, you also reduce your GHG emissions. The other one is to increase renewables among our energy mix. So in the Philippines, limited pa yung renewable supply, but whatever we get, we include in our energy mix. And then we are looking at how we use electric vehicles in our fleet.
You have already?
We have one in
One?
the fleet, oo.
pala.
Nabili
One pala.
namin sa
One pala.
Meralco.
Okay,
oo.
Try muna kung okay
Oo.
bago
Pero
bumili.
we are fixing our EV roadmap. How do we, because the law requires naman that by 2034, 5% of your fleet has to be EV. So we need to craft a roadmap to glide us to that target, diba? So medyo
you have
ano
a
pa.
huge fleet.
It's 5 years na lang.
Yes,
2030.
oo, malapit na.
And this one is used by whom?
It's
MVP?
the zone, no? Hindi eh.
He already uses an EV, si MVP.
Oo. No, we have it. It's actually
Kaya
being
baka yun ang binilang eh.
Hindi. It's being used for the zone. So it's for servicing clients. I think medyo we need to refine which vehicle we actually need for that purpose, di ba? And how the economics work. And then I guess at the end of the day, it's an ecosystem. The charging stations have to be in place. So yun. But getting there, so that's some of the things that we're looking at to be able to achieve our decarb target by 2030.
2030.
Oo, lapit na.
This would be a long conversation, but we're out of time, Melissa. We thank you so much and congratulations to
Thank you
PLDT.
very
How
much.
long have you been sustainability officer?
I think since 2021.
It's fairly new, eh, di ba?
Fairly
You
new,
would say.
But old na in PLDT.
Hindi
course.
naman halata.
Salamat, madam.
Thank you so much. That was Melissa Vergel de Dios, First Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer at PLDT and Smart.
Now, in other news, the MMDA brings back its heat stroke break. That's so their on-ground personnel can still function amid the stifling heat being felt for days now. JC Cosico has that report.
It's 1 in the afternoon when the sun's rays are strongest. And yet Annalyn, an MMDA street sweeper, still has a job to do along EDSA Reliance, covering the 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift. Not ideal working hours for her, especially since she is hypertensive.
Sakit ang ulo ko parate, nahihilo, ganun. Dahil sa init po eh. Tapos nasa gitna pa po ako.
For now, Annalyn just makes sure she is hydrated while on duty. Traffic enforcer Rodolfo also keeps a bottle of water handy. For he, too, is dealing with blood pressure problems.
Siyempre yung mga sasakyan, yung mga makina, mainit din po yan eh. So pagka dumadaan yan, ramdam mo siya yung init. Na medyo nahihilo po. Kaya minsan po talagang tatabi po kami.
On Thursday, March 6, the projected heat index in Metro Manila is between 39 and 40 degrees Celsius, slightly lower than the feels-like heat the past few days, hovering in the 40s. To help personnel cope, especially those in the field, the MMDA is once again enforcing a 30-minute heat stroke break. This means street sweepers and traffic enforcers can now take turns for half-hour breaks when the heat becomes unbearable. They can find the shade, rehydrate and rest to prevent illnesses related to high temperatures. The reprieve can be extended by 15 minutes if the MMDA personnel is not feeling well or if the heat index hits 40 degrees Celsius and up.
Precautionary measure ho ito dahil kailangan yung mga frontliners natin sa kalsada, kailangan maprotektahan po natin sa gitna ng init talaga.
MMDA's heat stroke break is in effect March 3 until May 31. The agency is also studying the possibility of providing personnel with uniforms like shorts, particularly during extremely humid seasons. Meantime, PhilHealth has also announced a benefit package for heat-related illnesses. 12,675 pesos for those who will be hospitalized for heat stroke and heat exhaustion, and more than 18,000 pesos for those who suffer from heat fatigue. Symptoms of heat stroke include a throbbing headache, rapid breathing and heart rate, flushed skin, nausea and vomiting, and a change in mental state or behavior. When this happens, PhilHealth reminds patients, especially those with pre-existing conditions, to immediately seek medical help.
Kung meron po tayong mga nararamdaman na at meron na pong pagkakataon na tayo halimbawa ay nahihirapan na huminga or meron pagkakataon na may mga hinimatay na because of the sobrang init, pwede po tayong madala sa emergency room para po mabigyan ng emergency treatment.
5. JC Cosico, We Are One News.
All right, just a few more minutes before we say goodbye on this Thursday night. So let's head on over to the south of the Philippines for our big picture tonight. And this is where a major expressway in the Visayas and Mindanao regions will soon rise. This is the Lapu-Lapu Expressway, or LLEX, and it will be the first of its kind in the region. It is set to connect the Cebu-Cordova Link Expressway, or CCLEX, to the Mactan-Cebu International Airport. This 4-lane highway will stretch 12 kilometers and is expected to cut the travel time from Cebu City to Lapu-Lapu City from 35 minutes to just 12 minutes. Earlier today, the MVP Group and the Lapu-Lapu City Government signed a memorandum of agreement for the LX. Travelers and businesses can look forward to faster and more efficient travel because this LX can accommodate a projected daily volume of 50,000 vehicles. I'm sure they're so happy.
Yay!
Oh, kasi sobrang traffic yan sa Cebu.
Oh, yes.
Speaking of bridges, we started off the show with a bridge.
Okay.
We ended it.
At least we end with some good news.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's it for the big story tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for watching. Good night.